man with no name. The storm had rolled in fast. Gray clouds swallowed the sky like a hungry beast, casting a dull shadow over Los Angeles. Traffic slowed as rain started to pour, drumming on the windshields, washing the streets in silver streaks. Most people rushed to shelter. But inside the emergency room of St. Andrew's Hospital, the storm outside was nothing compared to the chaos unfolding within. Claire Madison had been on her feet for 13 hours straight. At 27, she was one of the youngest nurses in the trauma unit, but no one questioned her skill or dedication. With her dark hair tied back in a messy bun and eyes full of quiet fire, Claire moved from one patient to the next like someone born for this life. She had seen everything, from broken bones to shattered lives, but nothing prepared her for the moment the paramedics burst through the doors with a man covered in blood. "Unknown male," one paramedic shouted. "Found. Unconscious near Griffith Park. Multiple lacerations, blunt trauma to the chest. Lost a lot of blood. He's crashing." Everything happened fast. The gurney rolled past, wheels squeaking, and Claire caught a glimpse of the man's face. It was bruised, pale, and soaked in blood, but somehow, something about him struck her. She didn't recognize him, not exactly, but there was a strange familiarity in his expression, like he was someone she'd once seen in a dream, or perhaps on a screen. She shook the thought off and followed the gurney into Trauma Bay 3. Dr. Ramirez was already there, barking instructions. "We need blood O negative now, pressure's dropping. Nurse Madison, hang the fluids, get him prepped for intubation." Claire moved with practiced urgency, but when the lab technician returned with a grim look, her stomach dropped. "We're out of a negative in the bank. Last batch went to a highway accident earlier tonight," he said. "Nearest supply is being flown in, but it'll take an hour." "He won't survive an hour," Dr. Ramirez muttered. Claire froze. She glanced down at the man. Unconscious, nameless, dying. She looked at the monitor. His blood pressure was dangerously low, heart rate thready. The beeping of the machine felt like a countdown to death. She swallowed hard. "I'm O negative." Everyone looked at her. "You sure?" Dr. Ramirez asked. "Positive," she replied. "Test me if you need to, but don't wait. He'll die if we don't act now." It was a risky move. Staff donating blood on the spot was rare, and it came with serious protocols. But Claire didn't care. Something inside her screamed that this man needed to live. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what had happened to him. But in that moment, she knew she couldn't let him go. Within minutes, Claire was sitting in a chair nearby, a needle in her arm, watching the blood flow out of her and into a fresh unit bag. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes never left the man lying still on the gurney. She felt strangely connected to him, as if their paths were meant to cross. And though he didn't move, something in her heart whispered that he was fighting. That he could hear everything, feel everything. "He's stabilizing," Dr. Ramirez finally said. "His pressure's climbing. Good call, Claire." She felt lightheaded, not just from the blood loss, but from relief. As her donation ended, she watched the nurses rush to hook up the new bag to the man's IV. Life was returning to him. Slowly, but surely. They admitted him under the name John Doe. No ID, no phone, nothing but torn clothes and bruises. Police had been called, but with the storm flooding the city and dozens of emergencies piling up, they wouldn't arrive until morning. Claire finished her shift, barely able to stand. But before leaving, she visited the IQ where the man now lay unconscious, machines keeping him stable. She pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "You don't know me," she whispered, "but tonight you almost died. I hope wherever you were, going whatever you were doing, you get another chance." She reached out and gently held his hand. It was cold, but strong, calloused. Whoever he was, he had lived through something, and not just tonight. What Claire didn't know, what no one in the hospital knew, was that the man she had just saved was not some anonymous wanderer. He wasn't a homeless stranger or a forgotten soul. He was Keanu Reeves. Yes, the Keanu Reeves, but he wasn't there as a celebrity. He had been traveling in secret, off the grid, trying to get away from the noise, the cameras, the endless spotlight. Only a few people knew his whereabouts. And now, because of a brutal assault in the shadows of Griffith Park, even he didn't know what would come next. As Claire stood to leave, the man stirred. His fingers twitched. His eyelids fluttered for a moment but didn't open. She didn't notice. And that was the beginning. The beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. Waking without a name, the morning came slowly, pressing its soft golden light against the rain-drenched windows of St. Andrew's Hospital. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the city washed clean but worn down. Inside the ICU, the world was quiet except for the steady beeping of machines. It was in that silence that the man who had almost died began to wake. His breath caught in his throat, shallow at first, like a man surfacing after being held under water for too long. Fingers twitched, eyelids fluttered. Then, slowly, his dark eyes opened, unfocused, searching the room as if he were seeing it through a fog. A nurse had just entered for routine checks when she noticed. She froze for a second, clipboard in hand, then rushed to his side. She called, for the doctor, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and relief. Moments later, Dr. Ramirez came in, followed closely by Claire, still pale from the night before but refusing to rest. The moment their eyes met, something shifted in the air. He didn't speak, but when he saw Claire, his gaze lingered, not out of recognition but with a strange sense of peace, as if her presence made the confusing reality around him feel a little less threatening. "You're awake," Claire said, gently, her voice barely above a whisper. She smiled even though her heart raced. "You're going to be okay?" He blinked slowly and tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His throat was dry. The doctor handed him a small cup of water and helped him sip. When he tried again, the words came out hoarse, broken like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Where am I?" "St. Andrew's Hospital," said Dr. Ramirez. "You were found unconscious last night. You lost a lot of blood. We had no identification on you. Can you tell us your name?" The man looked down at his hands. His brow furrowed. Silence fell over the room. Claire watched as confusion darkened his face. He looked around the room as if the walls might hold the answer, but his voice trembled when he finally spoke again. I don't know." Dr. Ramirez exchanged a look with Claire. It was a possibility they had feared. Trauma-induced amnesia. Claire stepped closer, her voice soft. "It's okay," she said. "You've been through something terrible. Your memory might come back with time. You're safe now." The man nodded slowly, as if trying to convince himself that it was true. But behind his tired eyes, a storm of questions was beginning to rise. Over the next few days, Claire became his shadow. She checked on him more often than her shifts required, sometimes even staying late. She told herself it was part of the job, ensuring the patient's comfort and stability, but deep down, it was more than that. There was a quiet connection growing between them, one neither of them could name, like the beginning of a song neither had heard before but somehow remembered. He began to recover quickly. The bruises faded, the wounds healed. And with each passing hour, Claire found herself drawn to him, not because he was famous, because she still didn't know that part, but because he was kind, quiet, thoughtful. He didn't complain. He didn't lash out. He thanked every nurse who entered the room. He looked out the window a lot, as if he was waiting for something, or someone. He began to speak more, asking questions about the hospital, about life outside. He would smile gently when Claire told him about her long days or the time she got locked in the supply closet for 2 hours. She made him laugh once, and the sound of it filled the room like sunlight through cracked glass. Still, his memories remained locked away, sealed behind a wall of trauma he could not climb. He would sometimes wake in a sweat, gripping the sheets, haunted by dreams he could not explain. One night, Claire found him sitting upright in bed, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "I feel like I should know who I am," he whispered, "like I'm chasing something in a dream. But every time I get close, it disappears." Claire sat beside him. "Maybe it's not about remembering everything at once. Maybe it's about discovering who you are now." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You saved my life, didn't you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "We didn't have your blood type in stock. I gave mine. It was the only way." He stared at her for a long time. "You didn't even know me." "I didn't have to." They sat there in silence, and in that moment, something invisible passed between them, an understanding that went beyond names and faces, deeper than memory. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, a different kind of search was happening. Private investigators hired by Keanu's management team had been looking for him for days. He had been missing after canceling all his public appearances and going silent for over a week. Rumors had begun to spread in Hollywood. Some said he had gone off-grid again to escape fame. Others feared something worse, but only a few knew the truth, that he had been traveling quietly, avoiding attention, visiting places from his past, searching for something even he couldn't name. When the investigators traced a report from Griffith Park about an unidentified injured man, they narrowed their focus. The hospital had registered him as a John Doe, but facial recognition eventually flagged the match, and when the system ran the match a second time, it confirmed the unbelievable. Claire had no idea that the world outside was about to shift. She had no idea that news vans would soon be parked outside the hospital, that reporters would flood the lobby. She had no idea that the man who now trusted her more than anyone had lived 1,000 lives in front of millions of fans. To her, he was just a soul in pain, a man searching for meaning. And to him, Claire had become his anchor in a world he no longer recognized. But all of that was about to change. Because while Claire took his vitals one afternoon, unaware that the hospital's front desk had just received a call from a high-powered Hollywood agent, the man in the bed was staring at the television mounted on the wall. A commercial ended and the screen flashed a scene from an old movie. A car chase, a young man behind the wheel, gunfire, adrenaline. And then came a close-up of the actor's face. His face. The same face as the man in the bed. His mouth fell open. His heartbeat spiked. Claire noticed. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. He pointed at the screen, his voice shaking. "That's me." She looked at the TV, confused. "That's Keanu Reeves." His eyes widened. He looked at her. He looked at his hands. "I'm Keanu Reeves." Claire's heart stopped. The air in the room felt heavier. The truth had come crashing in like a wave. But with it came even more questions. Who had attacked him? Why had he been alone in the park? And what would happen now that the world knew where he was? Claire didn't move. Neither did he. Outside the room, the chaos was beginning to stir. But inside, two people sat frozen in a moment that would change everything. The world comes crashing in. The next morning didn't feel like any other morning. At St. Andrew's Hospital, the hallways, usually filled with the familiar rhythm of footsteps and the soft murmurs of busy staff, now echoed with tension. Security guards stood near the front entrance. Extra police presence loomed at the gate. Claire noticed it all the moment she stepped through the staff entrance with her coffee still untouched in her hand. The receptionist didn't meet her eyes, the way she usually did. There was a hushed urgency in every corner of the building. It didn't take long for the whispers to reach her. Paparazzi outside, satellite vans parked on the street, cameras flashing, voices shouting. "They said it's him," someone muttered as Claire walked past. "The real Keanu Reeves. He was right here this whole time, can you believe it?" But Claire didn't slow down, her heart was pounding. It wasn't disbelief that weighed her down. It was the storm of emotions she had been trying to suppress ever since he remembered. Last night, after recognizing himself on the TV screen, he hadn't said much more. He had simply stared into space for a long time, like he was trying to make sense of a broken puzzle he didn't remember ever starting. Claire had stayed with him for hours, sitting silently by his bed, neither of them speaking. And now, as the world outside clamored for a glimpse of the man she had quietly saved, she found herself walking faster, her chest tightening with every step. When she reached the IQ floor, two men in dark suits were standing near the nurses' station. They had the polished calm of people who weren't used to hearing no. One of them glanced at Claire but didn't stop her. Inside the room, the man who had once been just a nameless patient sat upright in bed, fully awake now, His eyes, clearer than they had been since the day he arrived, he turned as she entered. For a second, neither of them said anything. It was the kind of silence that carried more than words. "You remember?" she finally said. He nodded slowly. "Not everything. Not the night it happened. But pieces are coming back. Flashes. Faces. The sound of running. Someone hit me from behind. I don't know who." She stepped closer. "You're really Keanu Reeves?" He gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, I guess I am." Claire looked at him, searching his face for the man she had come to know over the past few days. The kind, quiet soul who said thank you even when he was in pain, who listened when she talked about her dreams, who once laughed so softly it felt like sunlight after a storm, and he was still there, under all the noise. But now he came with weight, with a name, with a world chasing after him, and that changed everything. "You didn't tell me," she whispered, more hurt than she meant to show. "I didn't know," he replied. "And when I started to remember, I was scared." "Of what?" "Of losing this," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "Losing the peace I had with you. You didn't see me as anything but a man trying to live. For the first time in years, someone looked at me and didn't expect anything. And I wasn't ready to let go of that." Claire looked down, torn between understanding and the storm of emotions bubbling in her chest. "They're saying your team is coming, that the media's outside." "They are," he said. "But I didn't ask for them. I asked for one person." "Who?" "My sister," he said. "She's the only one who knows what really matters. She's the reason I was walking in Griffith Park. She asked me to take time off, to breathe, to be human again. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just disappeared. And then," he paused. Pain flickered across his face. Then someone tried to end it. Before Claire could respond, there was a knock on the door. A hospital administrator stepped in, flanked by the two suited men from earlier. "Mr. Reeves, your security team is here. They're ready to transfer you to a private facility. Your legal team is also requesting time with you this afternoon to discuss the assault. The hospital board has also issued a media statement. We've increased security around the building, for your safety." Keanu looked at Claire, then back at the administrator. "I'm not going anywhere yet." The administrator hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, you're a public figure in a vulnerable state. Staying here puts both you and the staff at risk." "Then add more security," Keanu said firmly. "I'm not leaving until I'm ready, and I'm not leaving without—" Speaking to Claire, Claire felt her heart flutter. The administrator left reluctantly. The door closed again. "They want to take you away," she said. "They always do," he replied. "That's what fame is. It pulls you from place to place, city to city, camera to camera. But I've never had someone pull me back into reality the way you did, Claire. I owe you more than my life." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," he said. "Because the moment I woke up, I wasn't just healing from wounds. I was healing from a life that stopped feeling real a long time ago." Before she could respond, another sound echoed from the hallway, shouting, loud voices. The media had somehow slipped through a gap in security. Within seconds, the hallway outside was filled with camera flashes and reporters calling out his name. The hospital staff tried to push them back, but chaos erupted. Claire's heart pounded as she ran to close the blinds. "They found you," she said. "They're going to follow you everywhere now." Keanu stood slowly against doctor's orders, his face calm but eyes burning with something fierce. "Then let them watch," he said. "I have nothing to hide. And if they want a story, let them hear the truth." He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The cameras went wild. Questions flew at him from all directions. "Where have you been? Who attacked you? Are you quitting Hollywood?" But he raised one hand, silencing the crowd not with anger, but with quiet presence. Claire stood behind him, stunned. "I don't have all the answers yet," he said. I'm still figuring out what happened. But I will say this. While everyone was searching for me, while the world thought I disappeared, a nurse with no fame, no spotlight gave me her blood, gave me her time, gave me her humanity. She didn't know who I was. And she saved me anyway. She reminded me of something I had forgotten. What it means to be seen not for what you are, but for who you are, and I want the world to remember that too. The hallway fell silent. Even the cameras stopped clicking. In that moment, Claire realized the man beside her wasn't just the famous actor the world adored. He was someone who had been broken and rebuilt in the quiet corners of a hospital room. Someone who had seen the worst and still chosen to believe in the good. But deep down, she also knew something else. The media wouldn't stop now. The world had found him again. And soon, their quiet bond would be tested by cameras, contracts, and crowds. The peace was over, and the storm was just beginning. The storm behind the smile, the next 2 days passed in a blur that Claire could barely hold on to. Her hospital badge, once just a key to the trauma unit, had become a beacon for attention. Journalists called the front desk asking for her by name. Strangers on the internet flooded social media with pictures of her face. Screenshots taken from grainy hospital security footage, leaked somehow, showing her standing beside Keanu Reeves in the hallway. Articles labeled her the mystery nurse, the woman who saved a legend, and Keanu's guardian angel. But no headline captured what Claire was feeling inside, confused, overwhelmed, and a little bit broken. She had never asked for any of it. She had trained to save lives quietly without applause. For her, nursing wasn't a performance, it was a promise. Yet now, everything she did felt watched. Her walk to work was followed by people holding phones. Reporters waited outside her apartment. News vans sat across the street with lights that stayed on long after midnight. Even inside the hospital, the attention didn't stop. Nurses whispered when she walked by. Patients smiled at her as if she were a celebrity. Her supervisors tried to shield her, but the pressure was relentless. Keanu stayed in the hospital longer than anyone expected. His wounds had healed enough to move him to a private facility, but he refused to leave. "I'm not done here," he told the hospital board during a closed-door meeting. "I owe this place more than money. I owe it part of my soul." There was something in his voice that silenced even the most hardened administrators. So they let him stay. And Claire, despite the chaos, kept showing up for her shifts. She didn't know why. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was something deeper. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she was the only piece of calm in a world gone mad. But the distance between them was growing. They didn't talk like before. Their time together was no longer quiet. There were always people around, bodyguards, lawyers, hospital board members. When they did speak, it was short, careful, as if they were walking on glass. Claire missed the man who used to ask about her childhood dreams. She missed the quiet talks about books and the way he laughed at her corny jokes. Now he smiled in public, gave soft statements to the press, thanked the hospital at every opportunity. But behind his eyes, Claire could see it. The weight of the world creeping back in, the old shadows reclaiming their place. One evening, after a particularly long shift, Claire sat on the roof of the hospital with a coffee in her hands and exhaustion in her bones. She often went there to breathe when the world felt too loud. Tonight, the city lights blinked beneath the stars like 1,000 confused voices. She didn't hear the door open behind her, but she felt the change in the air when he stepped into the space. "I thought I might find you up here," Keanu said softly. She didn't look at him right away. "Figured you were too busy for rooftops now." He walked closer, the night breeze brushing through his hair. "I don't want to be, but everything's changing." "You think?" she said with a small laugh, not out of joy, but fatigue. "I can't walk to the grocery store without being followed. People ask me if we're together. Magazines write lies about me. I didn't sign up for this." He sat down beside her, leaving a quiet space between them. "I know, and I'm sorry." She turned to face him then. "Are you?" "Because I'm not sure anymore. I don't know if I saved a man or unleashed a wave that's drowning me." He looked down at his hands. I didn't mean for this to happen. When I woke up, you were the only person who felt real. You didn't treat me like a celebrity. You treated me like someone worth saving. Because you were, Claire whispered. But that's not who they see now. He was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it and read. It was a handwritten letter, a thank you note. Not from him, but from a young girl named Mia, a cancer survivor who had written to Keanu 2 years ago after watching a movie that gave her hope. The letter had been returned unopened, but somehow, Keanu had kept it. I lost that letter for months, he said quietly. I was too caught up in life. But when I found it again, something changed. I started thinking about how much time I had spent running from people who actually needed me. That's why I left the city. That's why I went to the park. To find something real again. Claire stared at the letter, her eyes stinging. And did you? He looked at her then. Really looked. Yes. I found you. She wanted to believe him. Part of her did. But another part, the part that had spent the last few days being chased, questioned, and dragged into a world she didn't choose, was afraid. What happens now? She asked. He hesitated. I don't know. But I want you to have a choice. I don't want this world to swallow you because of me. So, I made a decision. Claire's chest tightened. What kind of decision? He reached into his coat and pulled out a simple folder. Inside were documents, donation papers, hospital foundation agreements, a proposal for a long-term care fund under Claire's name. It was everything she'd once dreamed of building. Resources for young nurses, support for underfunded patients, scholarships for students from low-income families. It was all there, with no publicity, no fanfare, just action. This is for you, he said. Not because you saved me, because you believed in me when I didn't even know who I was. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. I've made millions pretending to be someone else, but this is the first time I feel like I'm doing something real. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was healing. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he didn't move. Away. They sat like that until the stars blurred and the night deepened, but far below them trouble was stirring. Someone had followed Keanu to the hospital, someone who had something to lose if he started asking too many questions about what happened in the park, and that someone had just arrived at the emergency entrance, with a name tag, a fake identity, and a hidden agenda. And inside the hospital, a nurse who thought her hardest choice was behind her was about to discover how far danger would go to keep the truth buried. The face in the hallway. The hospital looked the same on the outside. The same glass doors, the same soft beeping machines, the same long white halls echoing with quiet footsteps. But something had shifted under the surface. Claire felt it the moment she walked into her morning shift. There was a tension in the air, not the kind that came with media attention or excited patients asking for autographs. This was something colder, something that pressed against her chest like a hidden threat. Her instincts told her something was wrong, even if she couldn't yet name it. She passed through the nurse's station, smiling out of habit, but her mind was already racing. Keanu had stayed overnight in a private room near the back of the West Wing, away from the IQ and away from the noise. Since their moment on the roof, things between them had shifted again. He had given her something she never asked for. Resources, a foundation, something bigger than herself. But it wasn't the money that stayed in her thoughts. It was the way he looked at her while giving it, like he was offering her a piece of his soul and hoping she would take it. And maybe she had. Maybe that was the problem. Because now she felt responsible for more than his health. She felt responsible for his safety. And deep down, for reasons she didn't fully understand, she was afraid. As she turned the corner leading to his room, she paused. A man she didn't recognize was walking out of the room slowly, wearing hospital scrubs. He carried a clipboard and moved like someone who belonged. But Claire had worked here long enough to know every face on her floor. and she had never seen him before. Something about the way he avoided eye contact, the stiffness in his shoulders, the forced casual walk, it all screamed wrong. She didn't call out right away. She waited until he turned the corner and disappeared down the stairs. Then she rushed into Keanu's room, heart pounding. He was sitting up in bed, blinking at the window. The blinds were halfway closed. "Did someone just check on you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked confused. "Yeah, a nurse, I think. Tall guy. Kinda quiet. Didn't talk much. Just checked the monitors and left." Claire moved to the machines and immediately noticed it. The saline drip had been tampered with. Nothing dangerous yet, but the line had been disconnected and reattached in a sloppy way, almost like someone had been testing access. She turned to him, her hands clenched. That wasn't a nurse and he didn't belong here. Keanu's eyes darkened. "You think he was the one who—" "I don't know," Claire said, her voice firm. "But I'm going to find out." She left the room and went straight to security. Her badge got her through the doors, and after a tense exchange with the supervisor, she was shown the surveillance footage from the last hour. They found the man quickly. He entered through the emergency loading dock, using a stolen staff badge. His face stayed down most of the time, hidden under a cap, but at one point he looked directly into the camera, and Claire froze. She knew that face. She had seen it before. Not in person, but in the file she had secretly opened a few nights ago. A police report detailing Keanu's assault. One of the suspects had vanished before questioning. A man with a criminal record, known for working as private security for dangerous people. And now, somehow, that same man had walked into a hospital and stood over Keanu's bed. "We need to lock down this floor," Claire said, her voice shaking. "He's still in the building, but the security team hesitated. Without a police order, we can't declare a lockdown. We've already increased staff, but unless he makes a direct threat—" "He tried to kill him once," Claire snapped. "Isn't that threat enough?" She didn't wait for an answer. She stormed back toward Keanu's room, calling the police herself. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop moving. She knew what was happening. Someone out there didn't want Keanu to remember. Someone was watching every step he took. And if they were brave enough to walk into a hospital, they wouldn't stop until the job was finished. When she got back to the room, Keanu was already out of bed, dressed, and pacing. "I heard," he said. "The security guard told me. You need to stay in this room. Police are on their way. The building isn't safe." He shook his head. "I'm not hiding again. Not this time." Claire stepped in front of him. "This isn't about pride. This is about survival." He stopped and looked at her, eyes full of something fierce and unspoken. "I remembered something last night. Not just a flash. A name. The person who paid to have me followed." Claire's heart sank. "Who?" "A man named Vincent Ellery. He's part of a silent investment group, media control, property manipulation, private arms funding. I started asking questions about one of his real estate deals last year. It didn't sit right with me. I backed out of a film that was secretly tied to him. People said I was paranoid, but I knew something was wrong." "So they tried to make you disappear," Claire whispered. Keanu nodded. "I was supposed to go to a charity event that night. I took a walk through the park instead. Someone followed me. I remember turning, and then nothing." Claire looked at the door, then back at him. "We need protection. We need real help. We can't fight this alone." Keanu walked over and gently took her hand. "I don't want you caught in this." "I already am," she said. "The moment I gave you my blood, I became part of this story. And I'm not walking away." For a second, the world stilled. Two people in a hospital room surrounded by danger, standing side by side in defiance of fear. But outside the door, footsteps echoed again. Not the soft ones of a nurse, not the sharp ones of a doctor, but slow, measured, deliberate. The kind of steps that meant trouble. Claire turned to lock the door. Her hands were trembling again. She looked at Keanu. "We hold the truth now. and someone wants it buried. He nodded. Then let's make sure they never do. A moment later, the door handle rattled, and the lights in the hallway went dark. The light beyond the silence, the lights flickered twice before they cut off completely. Outside Keanu's room, the hallway dropped into a strange darkness. Only the emergency exit signs cast a faint red glow across the walls. The sudden silence that followed was sharper than any alarm. Claire felt it in her bones. This wasn't a power outage. This was intentional, calculated, a message. Somewhere in the shadows of that hospital, someone was moving toward them with a purpose, and it wasn't to help. Keanu reached for the door, but Claire stopped him, her voice low and steady despite the thunder in her chest. Don't open it. If they cut the power, they've likely disabled the cameras too. We're on our own for now. Keanu looked around the room. It was a hospital space, not a fortress. No weapons, no hiding spots, no escape except the main hallway or the window, 10 stories above the street. He moved toward the window and peeked through the blinds. The street below was filled with flashing lights, media vans, police cruisers, onlookers, all waiting for a glimpse of a man who had once only existed behind a screen. They're watching, he said, stepping back, but they don't know what's happening inside. Claire moved quickly to the bedside table and pulled out her phone. No signal. The hospital's network was jammed. She tossed it aside and scanned the room, her mind spinning faster than her fear. Every nurse in trauma was trained for emergencies, but not this. Not assassination attempts, not silent enemies in stolen uniforms. A soft sound echoed in the hallway, a shoe scraping against the tile. They were here. Without thinking, Claire grabbed the IV pole and yanked the metal rod from its base. It wasn't much, but it was something. She handed it to Keanu, who took it without question. There was no panic in his face now. Only the calm of someone who had faced darkness before and survived it. He moved to the far side of the door while Claire stayed closer to the corner near the supply shelf. The handle turned again. This time, slowly. Deliberate. But before the door could open, another voice shouted from down the hallway. It was Officer Ramsey, one of the few plainclothes security guards stationed by the hospital ever since Keanu's identity had been confirmed. This is hospital security. Step away from that door and raise your hands. A scuffle followed. Then a sharp noise, something metal clattering to the floor. Claire and Keanu waited, breathless. Seconds passed. Then the door opened fast, but it was Ramsey standing there, breathing hard, weapon drawn. You're both okay? He asked quickly. Claire nodded, her voice barely working. What happened? One of them posed as a staff member and cut the main hallway cameras. He was heading here with a needle full of potassium chloride. You know what that means. Claire's knees weakened. Keanu's jaw clenched. We caught him just in time. He's not alone. We're checking every floor. But we've locked the exits. Help's coming. How did you know? Keanu asked. Ramsey glanced at Claire. Because someone tipped us off this morning. A man who's been digging into Vincent Ellery's network from the inside. Said you were the next target. He gave us details no one else could have known. Who? Keanu demanded. Ramsey hesitated. He didn't give a name. Just said he owed you. Said he was done watching innocent people pay the price for silence. Within an hour, the hospital had been swarmed with real law enforcement. The man who tried to harm Keanu was taken into custody, and as the lights came back on and order slowly returned, the weight of what had just happened began to sink into Claire's chest like a stone. She had come to work that morning expecting a normal shift. Instead, she had stood between a man and his death, for the second time. Later that night, after the police statements were given and the reporters pushed back once more, Keanu sat beside Claire in the same rooftop spot they had once shared in silence. The air was cold but clean. The noise of the world felt far away. You saved me again, he said quietly, looking out at the city. Claire didn't answer at first. Her heart still ached from the fear, the stress, the guilt of almost losing him. Then she finally whispered, You saved yourself too. You remembered. You stood up. You didn't run. He turned to her. But I couldn't have done it without you. You were the only one who saw me before I saw myself. She looked up at him, eyes shining. What happens now? He smiled gently. Now, I stop hiding. Not just from the world, but from the things I care about. The truth. The people who matter. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. A pendant. Simple. Silver. Shaped like a compass. It belonged to my mother, he said. She always said when you're lost, find the thing that points you home. He pressed it into Claire's hand. I think you're my compass. Her fingers curled around it slowly. Breath caught in her throat. Keanu. You don't have to say anything, he said. I just needed you to know. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars blink above a city that never truly slept. Weeks passed. The investigation into Vincent Ellery's network led to arrests across multiple cities. The man behind Keanu's attack was convicted. The whistleblower who tipped off Officer Ramsey later contacted Keanu through an encrypted letter, revealing he had once worked on a film funded by Ellery's firm. Seeing Keanu step away from it had inspired him to do the same, and then expose everything. Keanu kept his promise. He stayed out of the spotlight for a while. He focused on the new foundation created in Claire's name, supporting trauma nurses, funding emergency rooms in low-income areas, and protecting frontline workers who faced threats from powerful interests. Claire stayed at the hospital. She declined interview offers, movie deals, book rights. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to help people. One evening, after a long day, she walked out of the hospital to find Keanu waiting by the sidewalk. No cameras, no fans, just a man in a black hoodie with a quiet smile and 2 coffees in his hands. Thought you could use this, he said. She laughed. Only if it's got too much sugar and not enough caffeine. Exactly how you like it. They walked down the street together. No headlines, no fanfare. Just 2 people who had survived something impossible and found something beautiful inside it. A connection no one could fake. A truth no one could erase. A beginning neither of them had expected. And so, the nurse who once gave her blood to save, a nameless stranger, found herself walking beside a man who had every name in the world, but chose to live like someone worth saving.